but a political party's literal job is to take those ideas, or a party platform, and to make them as palatable as possible for a larger demographic of people who aren't libertarian to be able to see the value, much like what Javier Milei did in Argentina. He wasn't going in saying, in order to vote for me, you have to be a libertarian first. What he did was he came into office and saying, these areas are going to go away because they're objectively bad relative to what we're going to be building here. And now people are seeing the value of these libertarian solutions. And guess what? Libertarianism is being embraced in Argentina infinitely more than it was just a short 3-4 years ago.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 366. I made a lot of edits to this show, and so it ended up getting pushed back. So I'm going to talk with Brian Nichols, and I hope this proves to be fruitful. So thank you, and here we go. I'm talking to Brian Nichols of the Brian Nichols Show. We're going to talk about the current state of the liberty movement and what's been going on right now. He's also in Indiana, where they have a great state affiliate in the Libertarian Party. How are you, Brian?
Doing good, Chris. How are you?
That's great. Hey, Brian. So how did you get started in the libertarian movement?
Great question. Yeah, no, great question. This is a question I used to ask back when I first started my show in 2018. It's the same thing I'd ask libertarians, because I think we all kind of assume we all came from the same area wherever we came from. I kind of came from that Ron Paul world, but it's a little bit different. I grew up in the 90s and 2000s, watched as we went from an era of prosperity to an era of just, perpetual war, increased surveillance state, increased spending. And Ron Paul was one of those voices actually speaking up against this. And in 2008, the seed was planted with the Ron Paul famous debate there with Rudy Giuliani. And then fast forward, actually, it wasn't really until 2015 that the true Ron Paul ethos manifested itself in me, where I was living and starting to breathe this libertarian stuff through his son, Rand Paul. And that's actually where I jumped headfirst into the liberty movement. I started working for Austin Peterson's Libertarian Republic, wrote some stuff for him for a while, and then I joined the We Are Libertarians network back in 2017 as a contributor. 2018, my show begins, and fast forward to today, and the rest is history.
Yeah, you've had a show for quite a while. It's still running. That's 7 years. What's kept you going?
Yeah, we just hit episode 1000 a couple weeks ago, so it's been really cool to see. But what keeps me going is the fact that there will be random one-off people who will either message me, members of my family, members of my friend group, random emails of people saying, "Hey, I heard XYZ episode and it made me think, or it changed my perspective." And that's really the end of the day, Chris, where so many libertarians fail, is that we get so intoxicated by the ideas of liberty that we almost turn into like these little logical reasoning robots, where we say to people, here, read this book and you'll become a libertarian too. The problem is that not every single person has, 4, 8, 12 hours to sit down and actually like digest a libertarian book, right? They're parents, they're working, they're trying to just make ends meet. So when you're able to do these episodes that are 30, 45 minutes, an hour long, and we're talking about not the libertarianism, but rather the value and the outcomes that libertarian solutions can bring to the table, that right there is profoundly more impactful than throwing a book at someone. So that really is, at the end of the day, why I keep doing this, because it makes a difference and it helps people who aren't in our world. And that's the idea, right? We don't need to sing to the choir. We need to make sure that we're preaching to the right pulpit, or from the right pulpit to the right pews. And in this case, we have to start branching out and saying, who are the folks who are open to our message and willing to absorb the message, versus who are the people who are already bought in and are just gonna tell me how pretty I am and how right my ideas are.
Yeah, that's the whole throwing a book at somebody. I do think I don't. People just aren't going to, because people don't have that amount of time. Yeah, I'm even kind of amazed, doing my own show, that a lot of people don't seem to understand that you can stop the show and come back to it later.
They have this attitude, I have to listen to this show all in one setting. It's that, like, no, you don't have to do that. You pause it and you come back later. Although I will admit some of the hosting platforms do have issues with that, especially Twitter. I mean, I will listen to something on Twitter, pause it, and then maybe I come back a day later. I've rebooted my computer, and then Twitter has lost the pause point. But
Yep.
and Twitter, and they're not. Some of the sites really need to work on that, but otherwise, it's yeah. I don't. I mean, when, for example, when I tell people about Ayn Rand, I tell them read her article about Marilyn Monroe. And also, it helps if it's something that people can relate to. It's certainly not these, books with 500,000 words in them, which is no. People just say that no to you. I sometimes worry that we're getting more and more very much to a culture though that really wants everything in a little bite. Though I don't think little bites are enough. But and who else is a part of We Are Libertarians? It seems like that's a whole network, or is that just what's been going on with that right now? If you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, we are libertarians. And just candidly, I'm no longer part of the network, but I'm still great friends with everybody over there for the most part. Like Chris Spangle, he's the guy behind the curtain, right? Who helped make everything run. When it first started, the We Are Libertarians network, not just the show. It was myself, the Boss Hog of Liberty podcast, which is a local Indiana podcast talking about Indiana politics, and then my show. And it was really the three shows. We ended up growing. I think at the heyday of We Are Libertarians, we had around 9 to 12 shows that were on the network. And by the time I left the network in early 2022, it was pretty much down to the original three. But I mean, at the end of the day, the reason I left the network was not so much because of anything with like Chris or the network itself, but rather the audience that I'm trying to communicate with. And it became very, very obvious that there are far too many libertarians in the liberty movement who want to be told how pretty they are, how right they are, and that it's other people's fault that libertarianism is not becoming mainstream instead of looking in the mirror and addressing the reality. And that is that we cannot be effective like salespeople of liberty if we ourselves are a hot mess, right? So if we're going out and we're trying to promote the idea of, scaling back the police state, while at the same point in time, we are on the other side of the aisle, well, not aisle, but the other side of our mouth arguing that yes, go ahead and embrace degeneracy and embrace these very almost conflict inducing types of scenarios in society. Like, no, that's not how you want to sell liberty. Going out and saying, well, we want personal responsibility, right? And then when people try to enact personal responsibility, tell them that they're bigots or they're racist, right? So I noticed that, especially in 2022, the larger faction of big L libertarians that were becoming more and more vocal again were more of the folks who don't really want to see the Libertarian Party grow. They want to see it become actually smaller, but more ideologically pure from their perspective.
I'm realizing now that almost every movement is going to have its big tent people and its orthodox purist people. And that's all that because that seems to be a tension in every movement I've been involved with. You certainly have it with Bitcoiners, the what I call the orthodox Bitcoiners versus the people who are more, open to all cryptocurrencies. Certainly it happens with Ayn Rand. And so I wonder if we're ever going to get away with that. But there is a lot of truth to the at least what I like to say, that a poor salesman blames his customers. If you're a good salesman, you know how to make your product appealing to those customers, and you wouldn't. I mean, you're not a good salesman if it's always the customer's fault that they're not buying. I mean, you're going to have some people that are just completely wrong, but yeah, I don't know where we go from that. That's one reason why I've gotten so obsessed with Javier Milei, is because this guy is actually selling to people. He's actually going out and reaching people. And I do think a lot of libertarians really are just preaching to their choir. And I don't know how you, and hey, For some of them, it pays the bills, so maybe that's all they're interested in doing, but it doesn't really spread things.
Well, and that speaks to the bigger issue, right? That the larger, and no, we're not gonna go into the nitty-gritty of, like, libertarian infighting and stuff, but I call this social club libertarianism, where you have people who are predominantly in this libertarian party, world, where that becomes their status signal in society, right? Like, "I'm the secretary of my local LP group." That's great. That doesn't mean anything, though, right? And going back to what you said earlier, it's not so much a matter of, like, being able to sell your product to any customer, but rather understanding first and foremost who your customer is. And there's a fundamental difference in trying to take someone who's not your customer or not even in your ideal persona for a customer and try to make them a customer versus finding the right person, the right market, and showing how your product, your service, your solution actually solves the problems they see or makes things objectively better. But, like, if you're going to preach to folks who are fundamentally against the ideas that you believe, then you're gonna obviously have, like, very little success in getting them on board. You might be able to align on one or two random issues, but that alone does not make them a libertarian. But at the same point in time, when you go into the internal libertarian party politics, there almost has become this religious perspective of how to determine who's a good libertarian and who's not. And if you're not one of the good libertarians, right, that per whatever the narrative would be of the leadership, then you're outcast, right? You're a social pariah. And that's not, again, that's not a political party. That's a social club. Like, the reason the GOP was able to win in 2024 was because they were able to bring together a coalition of very different groups of folks. The Bitcoiners, as you mentioned, libertarians, yes, conservative Christians, folks who were more centrist, moderate, the podcast bros, like all of these folks, the Make America Healthy groups, they came together and they elected Donald Trump. And that's, at the end of the day, like, that's the goal of a political party. It's not to be the social, club for, like, libertarian purist thought. If you want that, go to the Mises Institute, go to Cato Institute, go somewhere else, right? But a political party's literal job is to take those ideas or a party platform and to make them as palatable as possible for a larger demographic of people who aren't libertarian to be able to see the value, much like what Javier Milei did in Argentina. He wasn't going in saying, in order to vote for me, you have to be a libertarian first. What he did was he came into office and saying, these areas are going to go away because they're objectively bad relative to what we're going to be building here. And now people are seeing the value of these libertarian solutions. And guess what? Libertarianism is being embraced in Argentina infinitely more than it was just a short 3-4 years ago. So that right there speaks to, it's not a matter of singing to the right, like, to the audience you want to sing to. It's a matter of, like, understanding who needs to hear your message and is actually open to receiving the message. And that is just the antithesis of how libertarian internal politics have been for 45 years. And it speaks to our lack of success.
Yeah, the lack of there's definitely I don't know if yeah, I think some people may I don't know if people necessarily come to it for a social club, but it definitely uh,
You don't think so?
they're not
Have you
everybody.
met some of the folks here?
Well, let me I said everybody. I mean, I do agree. I think about 20 to 25% of people go to LP National just to get drunk. And I said, well, you could stay home and do that. And there really are a lot of people who aren't serious. I mean, I've proposed that we have a 2/3 requirement for adjournments, and the person in the event of a failed vote, the person who requested it has to leave. Because you have these people who do adjournments because, well, if you didn't want to be here, you shouldn't have come here to be a delegate. Uh,
Well, respectfully, Chris, I think, this kind of goes to one of the areas where the Libertarian Party has failed. And that is, like, this almost Robert's Rules of Order mentality of how we need to govern as a party. At the end of the day, it's these little artificial barriers that are put up that keep people away. We need to be a much bigger tent party. And that means at times, like, we need to just grow the pie, right? We talk about this in economics. Like, there's this fixed, pie fallacy where folks say there's only so much to give around, so we have to divide the pie as is. And we say no, we can just grow the pie. That's what the Libertarian Party has to do. If there's any hope for success, is grow the party. And you don't grow the party by putting up more barriers, more, more legalese, more qualifiers to become part of the party. You do it by saying, "Hey, this is the outcomes we're trying to accomplish. Are you on board? Awesome. Even if it's not 100%, if you're 75% on board, you're 80% on board, heck, you're 65% on board, I would objectively take that person over trying to say, okay, we're going to have a much tighter, smaller group of people who are maybe more ideologically pure and more like invested in the party, right? But we're going to stay like a fifth of the size that we could be. I think that's the problem with some of the thinking, is that we're looking far too much at what we want it to be, ideologically speaking, versus what the party should be as a political party.
Yeah, I don't know if we put up barriers to people joining the party. I mean, we have things like Robert's Rules of Order to ensure that everybody at least feels like they're heard. And even if their vote, it's a matter of, we want your votes to count. We want to keep the things fair so everybody has a voice. It's obviously there might be different rules for conducting business, but we still have rules for conducting business for a reason. I mean, they're not there to thwart things up, but uh, the and from there though, I mean, I just I do wonder how many people are serious though, maybe because there is a commitment involved. And obviously there is a lot of work to this, and it's not always fun. And I don't know how I do think we probably need to figure out ways to make politics a little more fun, which is something Milei does. He wants to have fun and and he understands that it can be a lot of work. And when people have fun, they're more likely to come back. And I don't know if a lot of people are necessarily having fun, which is
No, who's having fun being called a bigot for having a different of opinion in libertarian circles from a social standpoint, right? I'm told that I'm irrational and repugnant because I dare question drag queens reading storybooks to children at public libraries. I'm sorry, that isn't having fun, right? Like that is trying to put up these social barriers, be it written down Robert's Rules of Order or not, to exclude people from coming into the party. And I hear you, like there's an idea that we want to make it so everybody in the party has a voice, but the that might be the intention, but the outcome is vastly different, because the outcome ends up being the loudest, most goofball voices in the Libertarian Party become the people carrying the mantle. And I'm not meaning to pick out people in particular, but you got folks like Chase Oliver, who became our nominee here, not even getting like third place like all other libertarian candidates, getting fifth place in this election. You got folks like Karen Ann Harlos, who's going out and preaching to folks, well, if you're not following all of our certain rules and bylines and platforms, sorry, you're not a libertarian. Go join the GOP. I've had folks, you mentioned the Libertarian Party of Indiana. There's lots of good folks here, but there's also folks who 1000% jump on board with the social leftist progressive mentality of libertarianism, where bigotry is irrational and repugnant when anybody dare questions the social orthodoxy of left-wing progressivism as it manifests itself in our society today, and more specifically impacting kids. Anybody who raises concern to that get told that you're not welcome because you're not being inclusive in thought. So I hear you. The intention might be to promote that type of environment, but the actual like tangible outcomes are anything but.
yeah. First of all, what you're talking about has absolutely positively nothing to do with Robert's Rules of Order.
No, I think it does. I think it does, because it tries to keep. I mean, the rules, the Robert's Rules of Order is a matter of trying to maintain decorum, but at the same point in time, it's also a way to keep people from speaking out when it's not their turn to speak out.
Yeah, but and I very much agree with you that this is a problem. I mean, these people do not know how. It's almost as if these people do not know how to articulate their positions, and therefore they just resort to name calling. This is not something that was happening 20 years ago, and I've seen it in a lot of things. And by the way, I believe Harry Brown was also fifth place as well. So I'm not going, but we have these people who come out, and I agree though that if you're not going to do, and there are certain functions of the party, if you aren't going to do those functions, I do ask, why are you here? So yes, if you went to the convention and ended up voting for Trump, I am asking, why are you here? Especially, and so,
Do you want the answer to that? because the Libertarian Party is seriously unserious. It's one thing to be at the convention and trying to steer the Libertarian Party in a direction that you know is going to be more palatable to your average voter. It's another thing to say that I'm going to go and just march in lockstep with whatever the Libertarian Party, by and large, decides on as a collective body. If the Republican Party was trying to march in the direction of libertarianism, let's just pretend, right? Like Thomas Massey and Rand Paul are the torchbearers, right? And all of a sudden, throughout all the process of trying to get people on board with that, they go ahead and nominate Bernie Sanders. I'm not going to vote GOP just because the GOP nominated Bernie Sanders, right? We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can have the principles as a compass to point us towards the direction we want to go, but the principles and the compass itself are not the direction. The compass is showing you the direction in which you're trying to get to. So if we are going back to always saying, but the principles say, that's great. The principles are not the end destination. The principles are the guiding light to show us how to get to where we want to go. And going back to the overarching issue, there are tons of issues that we're facing as a country right now. But the problem is that we have to actually start somewhere. We can't just put our hands up and say, well, this thing is caused by this thing, and then this thing is caused by this thing. Well, these are two intertwined, so we just can't do anything about it. So you know what? If libertarians want to take even a position on something that might not be 100% by the principles, that we just have to reject that altogether. I think that's a silly argument. And frankly, Chris, that's why so many people look at libertarians in an unserious way. Because when it comes to saying, okay, here's where we are today, and here's the problems that me, the voter, are facing, you tell me I'm wrong. And you tell me that, who are you going to blame next if we solve this problem? What are you going to do next? Okay, you know what? Fine. I'm not going to pay attention to the libertarians because you guys don't take my concerns seriously. I wonder who will. Oh, Trump, he's going to take our concerns seriously, or at least show that he does, pretend he does. At least he's listening to us and he's pretending, right? Libertarians aren't even willing to pretend. We tell people that they're wrong, they're stupid, they're bigoted for having beliefs based on things that either A, they're experiencing in their own lives, or B, things that they have seen other people experience. And I think it's entirely a backwards perspective to think that if only we tell people how wrong they are, and if only they come to see the light of, it's like, oh yeah, this is how things will get better by just saying that libertarians are right about everything. That's just not how like people make buying decisions.
Yes. I think people make buying decisions largely because of the verbal or the nonverbal. It seems like you're not doing very well, and or it seems like you seem like a guy who can get things done. I don't know how we certainly it doesn't help matters that we, but granted, and it's true, you can't even if fears are totally manufactured by propaganda, you can't necessarily dismiss them.
You can't. If you came to a doctor and you said, "Hey, doc, been having heart pain, been having like really bad heart pain," and they're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, "No, doc, no, doc, I've been having heart pain. Can you help me out? Have you been working on your stress?" Yeah, no. You're like, it's not a big deal, right? You're not gonna listen to that doctor. You're gonna go find a different doctor. You're gonna get a second opinion. I'm sorry, libertarians. We've been a terrible job, and we're not getting the first opinions like taken as truth. People are rejecting us outright. We're not the preferred doctor. They're going to other doctors, and instead of saying, maybe it's us, we say, those idiots. If only they listened to us the first time. Like, of course they're not going to buy what we're selling, which speaks to why we have never gotten above 4% from a national election ever.
I do think that one of the worst elements I think is you'll see some people will say, well, things are just getting better and better. You know, they'll say like, well, things are better than they were in 1970. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, they're better for some people, but I don't, and one of the, and again, what I often tell people outside of America that, well, our life expectancy has been going down since 2014. I mean, these are all problems, but I also, uh, there's the problem also of treating the symptoms versus treating the actual disease.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of politics, especially on, okay, college costs are astronomically high. I think we can agree with that. And one person says, well, we'll just make it free for everybody. And the libertarian approach is look at, well, geez, why is college so expensive? Well, we've got all these little factors here. Maybe we should get rid of some of these programs. And I could say the same things about healthcare. Healthcare is exactly like that. It's gotten so expensive, but
Well,
some
and Chris, if I may, right? You're right, but there's another step that libertarians don't take. And this is, by the way, this is not just a libertarian thing. This is a sales thing. For folks who are wondering, my day job, I work in this B2B sales world. I teach sales teams. I teach outbound go-to-market teams. Like this is my world, right? And when I'm teaching us, like I'm teaching teams, it's one thing to show how you can solve the problem and to understand like what the symptoms are that led to the problem, right? But the other part that is almost always forgotten is that you are not the first time, by and large, that somebody is hearing a new idea and making a buying decision. So the reality is they made a buying decision in the past to support one policy or another, and we need to know why. It's not a matter of just simply saying, here's the problem, and here are the symptoms that led to this problem, and here's how libertarian solutions make it better. We have to address the human element of this. And that is, why did the person that we're talking to make the buying decision one way or another in the first place? And it doesn't matter how great our arguments are. It doesn't matter how great our solution is. If we don't understand the why behind why people buy, we could be selling the best thing ever and they still wouldn't buy it. So it requires us to actually get out of our own heads, get out of our group chats, and actually talk to people like people without the narrative, without the intentions, without leading with, trying to like sell them on something, and just understand. Like put yourself in their shoes, empathize. You might not agree, and that doesn't matter. That's not the point. It's not a matter if you agree with them or not. You have to understand why. I agree with libertarians on like 85, maybe 80% of our solutions, right? The problem is it doesn't matter how right we are. It doesn't. That we are past that. We know that our solutions will win. Okay, but like not from winning in the court of public opinion, just in like the solution. If we had our vacuum sealed hyperbaric chamber, we control all the variables, we know our solution will win. Okay, that's great. Take it to the next step. How do we actually sell it? You don't sell it by telling people that there's an inherent, need to hate other species and other people in our species. You don't make it by telling people that they're wrong for having a certain concern. You do by meeting people where they're at on the issues they care about, by walking in their shoes, empathizing with them, understanding with them, crying with them, showing that you get it and you care. But like at the same point in time, understanding who your target market is. If everybody is your target market, nobody is your target market. You have to understand who are the people who are more open to your ideas. And with them being more open to your ideas, understand the why behind that and really speak to them and their concerns versus telling them their concerns are concerns to begin with.
This is true. And true. Dismissing their concerns, and it's they're not as concerned, for example, about nuclear weapons. And different people have different concerns. I mean, I don't understand but the failure of the many libertarians to address the COVID issue at all was certainly something that got me, and I think that probably addressed a lot of people's concerns. But I also think what happened with COVID also showed just how unbelievably self-destructive this species is, and
Well, I
how
mean,
much.
COVID also showed me how unbelievably unserious a lot of libertarians are. When I had to listen to, I had to listen to what's his name from the Cato Institute, going on stage to defend COVID mandates, right? Or I hear Robbie Swabe from Reason defending mask mandates or proof of vaccination. Like I'm sorry, like that shows me that when push comes to shove, Chase Oliver, Robbie Suave, go through the list, that y'all will bend the knee. You'll do whatever the state says. You'll do what the experts say. And it's funny, like some folks who will say how unlibertarian or how unprincipled certain people are when push came to shove and literally everybody in the world was experiencing the exact same authoritarian push. Libertarians, by and large, who they carry that banner of bigotry is irrational and repugnant, were the ones who were the quietest, or even worse, enabling the very real pain that was coming to the average person. And that right there is what really just I'm sorry, I can't take those people seriously. They are seriously unserious people. And you're right. Like if we want to see things get better, we have to actually stand up and speak out when the going gets tough. And that was an area where the going got real tough, and lots of libertarians tucked tail and ran.
Well, I would say it was one third of them. I'm not going to say all of them, but uh, I don't know where we go from here. But in some cases, there's no way a lot of these places can be fixed. I think New York City, for example, is a completely lost cause. There is no point, and I'd probably say the same thing about San Francisco, Minneapolis, St. Paul. There is no point trying to fix them. Just let them completely collapse and try to encourage the good people to move to places like New Hampshire.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean,
This is
that's not collapsitarian though. That's
yeah.
just reality, right? I mean, there's a reason I don't live in Philadelphia anymore. There's a reason I don't live in New York State anymore, right? Because I moved because of how bad things were getting. Even when shit hits the fan and stuff starts to get bad, we still have mechanisms in place to give us alternatives. And that was the whole idea behind the states, the original Articles of Confederation, right? The loose union between the states was to say, hey, if shit gets weird in New York, you can move to New Jersey, and if things get weird there, head down to South Carolina. And frankly, that's what saved us after COVID, was the ability for people to say, "Oh my God, what New York, what Philadelphia, what San Francisco, whatever they're doing is insane, and I want to leave." Right? That's the beauty of the American system. And instead of saying, "Well, screw that, let's just go ahead and let 20 million people flood over the border to pollute all of the system and destroy the system, so we don't even have these options," I reject that fundamentally.
Yeah, I it's, hard to say where we go from here. Well, like I said, you think you had to yeah, we gotta wrap up. You have anything else to say before we go?
No, Chris, I really appreciate the conversation. Folks, if you what you heard today, even though it maybe ruffled some feathers, and it maybe piqued your interest, I made you see something you didn't see before, and you want to learn a little bit more, head over to briannicholsshow.com. We have over 1,000 episodes here, the show going back to 2018. We've had experts from across the world, literally in the world of economics, public policy, foreign policy. I mean, you go into that, but also in the world of health, wellness, entrepreneurship, business. So if you want to understand not just the why behind certain things, but how to effectively sell these ideas, head over to briannicholsshow.com or head over to your favorite podcasting platforms. Search the Brian Nichols Show, hit subscribe, and of course, you can watch the show over on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, wherever it is you like to check out that kind of content. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate the
Yes.
chat today, and also you can find me at B Nichols Liberty. Forgot to mention that, at B Nichols Liberty.
Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, go buy my novel, Escaping the Village, check out my Substack. Uh, go to Buy Me a Coffee. People are giving me money there. Thank you, Brian Nichols. I'm Chris Baker. We're out.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.